Hi everyone, my name is Katherine Schreiber and I'm this year's host of the Companion Lecture Series, which goes along with the 2024 Norgard Designs Global Project called Honoring the Independent. Today's lecture is an artist interview and presentation by CraigCommanda, who works across multiple media, but primarily right now works in beadwork. His work is beautiful, and in the interview he talks about multiple conceptual and technical details of his work. So I really hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for joining.
Hello to everyone watching. My name is CraigCommanda, and I come from a place called Kitagan-Zibi, which is in Quebec. I'm Anishinaabe, and I've been a beater for going on 5 years now. And I learned when I was in film school, actually. And when the pandemic hit, I just started to practice at home a lot more, and then it led me into a whole other thing, which I'm still enjoying now. So thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here and to dive into my practice.
Thank you for being here. We're really excited to introduce your work to the audience of the Global Projects.
Amazing. So yeah, I guess we can start talking about this piece first. Um, this piece in particular was part of a trio that was shown at the Révélation Biennale in France of this was last summer, last June. And I was there with quite another of other folks as well. We were part of a delegation to show there of First Nations artists and Quebec artists. So it was a very fun time. And this piece in particular is called Dark Heart because when I created it, it to me seemed like it was in the shape of a heart. And the color palette is not just like the color dark, but I think the kind of vibration or hue that it gives off is kind of like that too, but in an interesting way. And so for me, that's why I named it that way. But what is really cool about my pieces is that they end up becoming different things for different people and can be interpreted in different ways. And so because of that, depending on where you're looking at it, it can be those different things according to you. Yeah, so that's a little bit about that piece. Yeah. Now these ones here are really cool. I ended up giving these to a friend of mine. And what's interesting to note about these pieces here is I suppose this is where I started to evolve as a bead artist because I started to use deconstruction on these earrings and I inserted a few warped squares into them on the sides. While at the same time utilizing other skills that I learned, such as fish skin leather tanning. I learned how to tan fish skin into leather, excuse me. And then on top of that, I embroidered some moose hair, which I learned from another friend of mine at a moose hide camp. So I have always kind of had an eye for making jewelry, beaded jewelry. I've seen many of my friends make jewelry, and I wanted to make things that were my own as well, my own style and my expression. And so this is one of the examples of that. I like trying to make my beadwork look like animals or plants. I'm very inspired by nature. And here again is another example. So this would be the prototype of the shape that we just saw previously. So I didn't make them two-tiered just yet. I wanted to start experimenting with fish. Like we can see here that this is a fish bone, a vertebra from a fish, from a big pike. And in my culture, we use a lot of these bones and animal parts in the things we make. And I wanted to include these in this work and also in my other sculptures because I feel that it adds a a touch of my culture and cultural history into these contemporary works that I make. So here too, again, I this is the beginning of my experiments, learning what about deconstruction, and then putting putting new shapes into these ones.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask you, for our audience who might not know, can you just explain a little bit about what deconstruction is
Oh
as a
yeah,
technique?
absolutely. Absolutely. Deconstruction is a technique where you take a beaded object that you make. In this case, it's a warped square. And what you do is you break one of the threads that's within. And what that does is that allows you to open up the piece and it gives you new possibilities. So, and in this example here, we can see that I made a smaller version of the warp square earring that I was working on and inserting a smaller one into it with a different color palette to give it contrast and um yeah, contrast and to really experiment with the design. And you can do this not just with warp squares, but other beaded shapes too.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, so this piece is really interesting as well. I called it Makwa, which in Anishinaabe means bear. And I named it that because I thought the shape kind of looked like a bear. But it's like before what I was saying about how my pieces can mean different things to different people. And this one is no exception. For me, it looks like a bear, so I called it that. But other people may see different things within it, such as, say, the movement of water. Sometimes it's flowers, or sometimes a bird, or an aquatic creature of some kind. I've heard that many a times as well. Yeah, so I should maybe talk about where and how I came up with this shape. It was when the pandemic hit, and I was at school still. I started first in bead embroidery, and I was doing a lot of work in that first with a challenge I saw on Instagram. There was this hashtag going around called the Bead This in Your Style Challenge. And that was really interesting because it was a person making designs and putting them out there for people to bead in whichever way they wanted to. So it was cool to cut my teeth with this. Then and then a little later on, I met Nico Williams, who at the time was working on his MFA at Concordia. So I learned some techniques from him through many of his workshops and collaborations with the public. And when the pandemic hit, I was at home practicing these techniques, but then I had a lot of time to be able to research into other techniques too. Like learning from Nico gave me the ability to sort of think and dream, okay, let's see what else is out there. What are other people doing? And what appeals to me? What's my voice? So I was looking through a lot of different ones, and then I stumbled on the Cellini technique, which you could probably see within this work. I combined that technique with some of the shapes that I was learning and experimenting with also. And the result is the piece you see here. It's not true Chill. Well, I suppose it kind of is because regular Cellini is like a circle. This one is way extended, way bigger, and is more of a journey than circle. But so that's how this piece came to be, is my journey through different bead weaving techniques in in search of what my voice is. What is my voice? Constantly asking myself, how do I express myself within this medium? And how do I make it my own? It's easy to make pieces that look the same as other work when we're starting out. But I was really thinking about how I can make it my own, and that's how it became what it is today. And I'm only just getting started too. I mean, I've been doing this for 5 years, but I still feel like I'm only on the cusp of what bead weaving could really be. That's what I love about it. Right, so this is just another angle of it. See how, for me, it kind of looks like a bear crouching. But as I said before, different perspectives give a different experience of the art. Trying to remember what this one's name was, but it was a part of the trio that was at the uh, Biennale in Paris. And uh, what can I say about this one? I really like this one because of how twisted it became. A lot of people enjoyed these as well. These pieces are all sold now. People picked them up. So I'm at least happy for that. Um, yeah, I think we can really see with pieces like this that I am heavily inspired by water as well. The colors, the shapes, the textures, the depths. I like to think about minerals also. I think about natural elements, sunshine. I think about these things as I weave the piece together, kind of like, oh, I'll put some sun here, oh, I'll put some rain there. Oh, I'll bring in a little bit of earth and then some swampland, that sort of thing. So for
That's
me, yeah, these pieces contain that kind of story. I'm trying to tell that with the colors and the shapes.
I was just going to jump in and ask you one of the kind of lessons of the 2024 global project this year is about using color in a particular way to create focal points. And just because you were starting on the topic of like how you choose color kind of bead by bead and what your inspiration is, I just wanted to ask if you have any like kind of like technical insight on how you choose color to accentuate your forms or to communicate. It sounds like you're just really inspired by nature and thinking about the different elements and bringing them into the piece. But I just wanted to like pinpoint that as a topic and ask you if you had anything else to add about that.
Yeah, I have uh another piece. I'm not sure if it's part of this selection, but one that I can tell you about is a piece that was inspired by a species of endangered turtle called the spiny. Well, this one in particular is called the spiny soft-shelled tortoise. And I made a piece that spoke to its endangered status and as a piece to raise awareness and conversation. But the main thing about that piece is that every bead color that I chose for that piece is it means something. There are yellows to represent the color of its eggs. There are greens to represent the habitat that it lives in, like the shorelines, the rocky shorelines, riverbeds, swamps, and water, of course, for it being an aquatic creature. Um, so when I choose these pieces and then I try to arrange them together, I also think about the shape too, because some of these beads uh have features to them that actually resemble more like land, for example. Like if we look in this piece, for example, we can zoom in on some of the what you call it, uh, the faceted beads, the 3/4 millimeter faceted beads. For me, those remind me of, depending on the color, different uh, features. And for this one, I kind of felt like it was like land, rock, granite. And so that's why I chose that bead in that size and that shape versus others, because I wanted to give that feeling or that story through that bead shape and bead color.
That's a really beautiful answer. Thank you. Yeah, the idea of like thinking about all aspects of like every single bead, the form, the color, the shape, and like how it adds to the content of your work is really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that question.
All right. Should we move on to the next one?
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, great.
Okay. So this one here is called Hyperspeed. And the idea behind this piece was actually inspired by sci-fi. Um, in many sci-fi franchises we all enjoy, we see sometimes the use of portals, teleportation, or faster than light speed travel, or depictions of them. And so we see the stars whipping past or different energies that make it that happen. And I've always been inspired by these kind of color palettes, that idea of space folding in upon itself and bending space time. So I brought those into this piece. That's what this piece to me is a representation of is like a reference to sci-fi and the things that I've seen in sci-fi.
I'll chime in with another question here, specifically because this piece is like very targetedly talking about like this bending, warping shape. I wanted to ask you maybe about how using different bead sizes becomes important to the form of your work. Um, I think my guess is that probably the larger the like using larger bead sizes and like rounder bead sizes and with smaller or like more square ones would start to like really increase the torque that you get in this technique. But I wanted to ask that for the bead nerds in our audience about how you negotiate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with for example, the Cellini technique, the bead sizes are graduated, and because of that, the spaces in between have to like compensate. And versus like if this was all done with just like size 11 delicates, for example, you would get a lot of straight lines and angles, but no curvature. It's kind of the same example as our fingers. Each bone is smaller than the one before it, and because of that, it's able to curl. It's the same principle with this work here. I place the beads in such a way that the I can manipulate how it curves and to what degree, but not the direction. Each piece that I make is not something I thought of like this piece, the way it looks is not something I thought of and it came to me in a vision. I had to make the work first, and then it became that way. So when it starts to curve this way and that way, I am very attentive as to which way it wants to go rather than what I want to do.
That's great, thank you. That's one of my favorite things about beadwork is that you have to kind of like negotiate with it, and it's kind of
Mhm,
impo like the best beadwork sometimes is ones that are impossible to plan out ahead of time, like, and you never can really tell what you're gonna get. You just kind of work with the
mhm.
beads until something like magnificent happens.
I think a lot of these bead pieces have a lot of prayer attached to them too. I say that because sometimes when I'm working on pieces and I need to pass my needle a couple of times through a bead, I'm like kind of praying, please don't break, please don't break. You know, and well, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
I know all about breaking beads. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess this is how the spirit gets into them.
Hmm. That's beautiful. Shall we move to the next?
Yep. Oh, these ones are interesting. I can't remember the names for those ones just because it was a little it's been a while since I made those pieces, but I made them to go to some art fairs like Art Toronto and Foire Pluriel here in Montreal. And uh this one reminds me a lot of being by a lakeside in the forest. In these places, there's just so many blues and greens and trees by the shoreline. And especially in my territory, there's a lot of these kind of places. They have a sense of tranquility to them. And with a lot of the pieces that I make, no matter which ones I make, I try to make them in such a way that the colors and the shape can evoke different memories and experiences people have had in their lives. And for me, that's what mine is, or rather, what this piece represents to me. This one, I was trying to imitate smoke. Smoke is very wispy and it turns around and just kind of gets everywhere and doesn't have. Sometimes it doesn't always have. How would you say? If you see a smoke cloud, it doesn't have a beginning or an end per se. And I wanted to imitate that sort of formed formlessness with this kind of work. It's kind of hard to grasp sometimes, but With beadwork, I feel like I can get a little closer to that. I'm fascinated by things that um, sometimes are a little out there. Yeah, the more paradoxical, the better. Hmm. Now, this one really reminds me, or rather, I believe I made that trio in the fall sometime. And so this one for me really represents the process of how a leaf, when it lands on the ground and starts to decay, it curls up. And if you take a good look around in like October, November, when everything falls and is curled up, there are some really crazy hyperbolic shapes that the leaves create. And I've been fascinated by that for a long time. So for this piece, I wanted to imitate how a leaf curls up or is in the process of curling up. So that's what this sculpture represents. This one's a little different because it took me a while to create it because many of the other ones we saw had 5 points, even though it wasn't completely obvious. Most of the ones I make are based on a pentagram or a warped pentagon, excuse me. Oh my gosh, a warped pentagon. But this one was I did it with 9 instead. So it's technically a nonagon, but it doesn't look like it. And I wanted to try it because I was thinking about the octopus. I was thinking more about aquatic creatures than the usual. So I wanted to challenge myself a little more. I knew it would take a lot more resources, um, more than 5, that's for sure. At least 4 times more of the resources. But I wanted to try it anyway. I knew it would take a long time, not a long time to do, but it would be some tedium. But I really wanted to just imagine like if you're on a beach somewhere where there's a lot of aquatic life and there was this strange octopus, maybe one of the ones that changes its colors. That's what was inspiring me at that time. I was thinking about the Pacific. Now this one is really interesting. Again, I ended up giving this one away as well. But what's cool about this piece is that I really wanted to push what I could do with the techniques I had in bead weaving, and I was inspired. This piece came from, or rather, I was inspired by a friend of mine, and she comes from the Snipe clan, and that's what was the basis for my inspiration for this work. So I really wanted to make. I looked it up. I Googled a Snipe, looked it up, and then I started to imagine. Okay, and then you see that shell that's in the back. That comes from her territory. So I used the shell as the color palette for the shape of the bird that I was attempting to create with the beadwork. You can see that there are some tail feathers in the back here that I attached to the back part of this piece. The front has more deconstructions on it. So I deconstructed it as well as did add-ons to make tail feathers. The beak is in the front, and I included the the bones to represent like the groundedness to nature. And the strawberries are very important as well to many First Nations around here. My nation, also her nation as well. And they are backed with fish skin leather. So this piece was a combination of contemporary and cultural significance that I yeah ended up giving away. In my culture, usually the first thing you make, you give it away. Now this piece is really cool too because I remember where it came from. But actually, it actually was inspired by a performance that I saw. It was having to do with, or rather, it was inspired by a flamenco show that I saw. I went to see a performance I got tickets for, and the show was incredible. There was a really good dancer there, along with really great musicians as well. So this piece is inspired by the color palette of the lights that I saw at the show. There was a lot of pinks, there was a lot of reds and oranges, and also the way the music flows, it goes on a journey. And the dancer also has a really flowing attire. So when they moved about and were dancing, you can see it move. You can see like a curvature. And I was really inspired by that. So I wanted to imitate that with this piece. I wanted to tell the story of how moving the flamenco show that I saw was. Yeah, so I wanted to, yeah. Now this one was really cool too. I did a little more experimentation with this piece. This one is called Tulip, and the previous one was called Flamenco Dancer. So this piece, Tulip, I started to experiment by adding more increases along the sides of the points that I already had. I just never did it before, and I wanted to understand or see just to see what happened. I had thought about this kind of technique for a while, but I just never really did it per se, because sometimes I don't have time to do research and development. Sometimes I just have to do production. But what is notable about this piece as well is that it too is a holder of memory and experience for myself. I was in Ottawa around the time of the Tulip Festival. So I saw many tulips with this kind of color mixture with reds and yellows. And what I did different with this piece was I started with one color palette and then I switched to another. And we can see that I did, or rather you can see the points in which at which I transitioned. And that too was new for me. I never tried it before, and I just thought to myself, how could I make this different and get a little closer to the gradient feel that I saw in my experiences at the Tulip Festival in Ottawa. And some of the drinks I had also had this kind of palette as well. And I thought that was very interesting. What did they call it? Synergy. And that also went into the thought process behind making this work. This one is cool. It's called A Change of Seasons. And I created it back in like around winter time because to, I was thinking about rather that how the seasons change. And in my culture, in Anishinaabe culture, there are 6 seasons instead of four because there are seasons that are like a transition seasons between. So I was thinking about that as I was making this, thinking about the grays of winter. It's a little bit bleak, but there will be new days, better sunrises. So I wanted to bring some of the sunrise colors into there. I wanted to bring in the greens of spring's emergence. I wanted to bring the verdancy of summer into play as well. And this piece is a result of that. Okay, so this piece we have here is called Lilac. It's a newer piece, and I was really inspired by the lilacs that we had around here in spring, in May. And for myself, I grew up with lilacs by the side of my mom's house. So for me, this piece is like a callback to those earlier memories and to just the delights that the lilac flower truly is. Yeah, sometimes my pieces don't, I don't want to say they don't go that deep, but they represent a memory or a feeling. Now, this one is an older piece. I would say it's among the first pieces that I made. I was experimenting at this point with different forms. So I worked a lot with triangle, worked a lot with warped square, and these are the warped pentagons that I base my sculptures on. So this one moves, it's kinetic, and It's really fun to flip around. But the what's interesting about this one is that I kind of patterned it after uh like quilt squares, something you would see in a quilt. And so that's what I ended up naming it, quilt, because it's like a quilt, and also it's a thing that's alive in a sense when you interact with it and use it. And quilts are the same way too. They're pieces that last a long time that gain life and memory when people use them or mean something to someone. And over this piece's lifetime, it'll gain story too, and it'll mean something to someone. Yeah, so that's what has inspired me for this piece. Though not at first, I was more in an experimental way, and I just wanted to create. But it was only as time passed and I looked at it again that it had more meaning for me. Okay, so this piece has a name also, and excuse me, the name of this piece is called Life Cycle. And we can see here that, well, it's like I was saying before, this is about an endangered species of turtle called the spiny softshell turtle. In Canada, it exists only in one lake, in Lake Champlain. But it seems that they're more numerous in the United States. But in Canada, they're pretty endangered. And I wanted to create this piece to talk about them. And it's like I was saying before, there are I place these in a way that tells its story. We can see by the corners here, for example, on each corner, there is an orange, not orange, topaz kind of color, a dark topaz, and that represents the tortoise's skin, because the skin is like that. And that's the color. The turtle is crazy too because it's flat. The back is flat like a pancake. So it's like this pancake that swims around. And so we can see here if we zoom in a little bit on one of those arms, the shape of it also looks like a turtle, but this is what I was talking about with the beads. See those beads there remind me of rocky shoreline, granite, places that the like the shoreline as well, with the addition of the sort of clear foresty beads and green beads next to it, represents the habitat that it lives in. So if we zoom out a little more, we can see the yellows that represent eggs, the beginning of life, uh, that kind of thing. And and furthermore, we have more of the water, more of the forest, more of the habitat, and altogether, this is a piece that represents its life, a life cycle. Many people tell me that my pieces look as though they're alive in a sense. But I find that really cool too, because in my culture, we consider beadwork to be animate. And I'm pretty sure it's because of all the work that we put into it. Because beadwork is like a medicine as well. The act of doing it is very healing, and making the pieces is a healing thing as well. And yeah, so I think it really works for this piece as well because it represents it. It then at that point becomes a piece that is itself and adds to the urgency of the conversation that I want to spark with it, conservation and sustainability and so on. Yeah.
That's beautiful. This sort of dovetails. I love the way that you're speaking about these pieces, and I've seen, and correct me if this is wrong because I kind of gleaned this from like different gallery websites talking about your work, and I know sometimes they kind of just say things. But it seems like you've spoken about this a little bit too, how like beadwork really feels like a form of communication in a very straightforward way. And
Mhm.
so I thought maybe I would just talk to you a little about that as you're kind of starting to talk about like the meaning in your work and how it has its own life. And also having gone to film school, like how does this idea of beadwork as communication how do you think about that? How do you work with that?
Mhm. Like I feel like I've been fascinated with that for a long time as well. Beadwork is communication. Because in many beadworks of old, they are a form of communication. and even botany too, because depending on where you're from, the way you do flowers, or sometimes the techniques in which you use to create flowers and other beaded designs onto objects, tells the person that's looking at it where you're from or what nation you're from, and sometimes even the region that you're from as well. And in that way, beadwork is very much a medium for communication to be able to describe yourself and where you're from. Or sometimes if you buy beadwork from another place, you can use that piece to talk about your life, your experience of going to that
Mhm.
place, buying that beadwork, and maybe what the artist said about that beadwork or what it means. Beadwork, in that sense, then for me, contains story. Uh, if not, if at least the story of how it was created, for sure. And in my contemporary works, I try to keep those things in mind as I create as well. I constantly ask myself, what is it that I'm communicating with this piece? What feeling do I want people to take away from it? Like, what am I talking about? And why does it matter? What does the significance of the idea or concept being woven into the beadwork, what does that mean because it's
Mhm.
a bead? What meaning does it give it? The fact that it has a life, let's say, and how does that interact with the concept I'm trying to, or the idea I'm trying to communicate?
That's beautiful. I think the idea of like weaving these stories into the work also adds like a special dimension to this idea of like kind of like weaving the prayer into the beads as well.
Mhm.
It's like this really totalitizing little universe that I think is also like very accentuated by like the complexity of your forms. Um, Thinking again about like the story of the beadwork and communication, can I ask you a little bit about like whether or not you think any differently between like whether you're making like a wearable piece to give away or to sell, or making a more like a non-wearable like sculptural piece?
That's very interesting you say that because you're not the first one to have mentioned, well, this could actually look good as a wearable.
Right, yeah.
Um, and it's not like I haven't thought of it either, for sure. These pieces could definitely be a good pendant or other piece like that. And then again, it would try kind of change the dynamic as well, because now it becomes a wearable piece, and as a wearable piece, people can activate it when they wear it, and when they're out in the world, you can talk about what that piece means, what it's communicating, what it represents to you in the person you're talking to. No, I've thought about it. I just never have tried it yet. I've been pretty busy as well, and it's sometimes hard to find time to do more research development and even time to dream and think about doing things like that as well.
Mhm, mhm.
I guess all that to say is that I'm definitely open to it. I'm just not there yet, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah, for
And I've
sure.
seen some really good woven necklaces as well. There's so many different types of bead weaving in necklace form
Mm.
that I've always wanted to try. Yeah. And even I've had some ideas for other works that I would like to make. It's funny because like I rarely make anything for myself.
Right.
They're giving it away or selling it or you know what I mean? I don't really have
Mhm.
a piece that I have kept for myself.
Yeah.
It's
Do
kind
you
of a
have works from other artists that you've acquired, been given, or bought that are in your life? Or do you have like really just a deficit of beadwork around you right now?
um well, I've bought some black ash baskets from Powwows here, and those have
Okay.
been inspirational for me as well. I have a project that I've been on and off kind of prototyping about how to imitate some of the features that I see on these black ash baskets into let's say a bead woven basket.
Hmm.
I know there's techniques out there that could help me achieve that goal. It's just finding them, putting them together, practicing them, having the resources and the time also to
Hmm.
do that. Yeah, I have been trying to expand outward as well because I don't want to be stuck just making these forms. I am known for them, but I do want to see what else I can do with say this direction I want to go in.
Hmm. Hmm.
But getting time to do that, time and space to do that, it can be hard sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the idea of like beaded vessels is really like always like they're always alluring objects, but adding this kind of sense of like having a story, having a life, and interacting with wearers, viewers, owners, beaters, the kind of holding mechanism of a vessel adds like just a whole other kind of dimension to that too. So it's very exciting. And I hope you get some time to work towards that too.
I hope so too. I have a pile about this high of ideas that I've never done.
Yeah. Well, to that point, I guess one of my special interests for the series, just personally and in my own work right now, is talking about how we like describe or document or take notes and share ideas about beadwork. So one part of this question I'd love to first ask you is just like if you take notes for ideas or like if you're working on a piece and you like have to remember what to do when you come back to it, or even if you like learn a new technique and need to like remind yourself how to do it, do you take notes or like drawings or write things down in any specific way? Beadwork is just like really hard to describe sometimes if in
Yeah.
there's like no set way of like illustrating or note like annotating or anything. So I'm really interested in how people handle that.
Myself, inspiration can kind of strike at any time for me. And so I really like to um, use my notes app on my phone
Mhm.
because I can access it super quickly and then type as fast as I can. And then once it's in there, I can capture it. It's sort of like capturing lightning in a bottle. Because like if I get an idea and all I had was like a note and paper, I could run the chance of losing it or not being able to find it, and then the idea is gone. So
Yeah.
I try as much as I can when I get an idea to capture it as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And if the idea is good enough to stick around, it'll be stuck in my brain. I
Yeah.
feel like that's how I know it'll be good and worth remembering. So I use the Notes app whenever possible to capture the ideas first.
Mhm.
Um,
And do you write these down in words or do you draw or a little bit of both?
Usually words because I can pop up in the Notes app, turn on the voice
Okay.
thingy, and then uh, quickly speak what I can do, what my idea is, and then fix it later.
Yeah, cool.
It's more about getting it as quickly as I can. Sometimes I do write down on paper if I have some more time and I can maybe spend more time with the idea, then I can properly more flesh it out, and then I'll use a pen and paper to try and
Mhm.
do that. Mostly, I still use words though, but I've
Mhm.
trying to use more imagery. But for me, the quicker the better,
Yeah.
and then I can just access it later. The drawback, however, is that I don't have a stack of paper where I can just like leaf through with my physical hands. I have to go into my phone and then dig through a bunch of notes that are
Yeah.
there. So every time I write down an idea, I put project idea up top so that I can search for it later because it would be just gone. I
Yeah.
feel like it's be sent into the abyss.
But
Oh,
these things
yeah.
are so ephemeral. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So my second half of that question is kind of so thinking about how we like document and like take down beading ideas and beadwork techniques. The other part of that is like how do we share them? And so I know you've cited a couple of teachers, Nico Williams being one of them, and I think a lot of our audience will know who Nico is and his work.
Mhm.
But maybe just describing like some of the like process, like did you so you mentioned, yeah, going to Nico's like workshops. Were there like written instructions or patterns that you followed that you found useful? Is it better to just see somebody do these things? Did you like see bead work out in the world and then try to work out who it is, like how to make it, like in reverse engineering style? Videos, like what do you connect with the most as ways to like learn and or like teach others like beadwork techniques?
Mhm. So first thing, Nico Williams is also Anishinaabe from Amjinang First Nation, and he is a really, really talented bead sculptor and has made quite a few works, notable works. And some of those are now in the National Gallery of Canada as part of Radical Stitch.
Mhm.
And Some of his notable pieces include the icosahedron, the giant icosahedron that was created for the Toronto Sick Kids Hospital. Another are the beaded lawn chairs that he and his team created, as well as like like a beaded octopus bag that was like an Amazon bag at the same
Mm.
time. That
Mhm.
was really incredible to see, especially in person too. There, he's got many more pieces on his website too, if anyone's interested to see. He's quite amazing.
Yeah, I did a for the audience, I did do a little bit of a feature of Nico's work on in the second lecture series for Sam Norgard's companion lectures in 2021. So there's a little bit of work of his there, but it's also like been years and he's been incredibly prolific. So even if you've seen that, definitely go and check out his new work in the last 4 years. He's been doing so many incredible things.
Yeah. And on to the other part of the question. In terms of learning, um, I didn't really have any, like when I showed up to those places, there was no pen or paper or anything like that. We were shown the techniques and then we went to work after that. So the first one that I did was a flat even count peyote stitch. That was the first one that I learned. And we were doing these little orange strips.
Mm,
Those were um, like when we were doing them, we're thinking about the overrepresentation of indigenous peoples in the prison systems. And orange is like, the color of the vests and
the jumpsuit, yeah.
also means every child matters.
Mhm.
And the other workshops that I took with Nico had to do with learning the flat peyote triangle stitch. And that was for a workshop, or rather it was like a series of workshops. I worked with like community members to make these triangles that were then assembled into this really big icosahedron. It was like 60 triangles or something. And that's how I cut my teeth bead weaving was through those workshops. There was no pen or paper. I just walked in, watched the hands, listened to the instructions, and then practiced from there. It took me a while to get the triangle stitch. I ended up making about 10 or 12 for that particular piece, but once I got it, it finally locked in. And now I've actually had a lot of experience as an educator now,
Mhm.
how to teach, or rather teaching the triangle stitch and discovering that I had a talent in education.
Great.
Yeah, I teach a lot now. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but I teach a lot of beadwork too.
Amazing. So are there ways that you feel that you like teaching the most, like different teaching tools, or is it the same sort of like, I'm going to show you how to do this, you're going to watch my hands, and then we're going to make sure you can do it too?
Well, I like to use as much visual aids as I'm able to get. And in particular with the flat triangle, there's an animated
Mm,
step-by-step on YouTube that I like to use. I pull that up. I have the workshop participants work on it first, or rather, I go through it with them first, just to be like, okay, so this is kind of what it's supposed to look like, the sort of techniques we're going to use first, and then I have everyone watch me as I do the work, as it were, or the demonstrate hands-on. So I try to get everyone to watch me first with the like just watching first, and then I tell them to do it. From there, I feel like I get a lot more success because of having that sort of example visual aids. Oh yeah, and that's the other thing about examples that I bring in some beaded examples.
mhm.
So usually now when I teach the triangle class, I make a tetrahedron and
Great.
I bring it to class. So I have everyone have a look at it. I pass it around just to show people what it is we're making and the possibilities that come with it as well.
Very cool. Um, so let me see. Let me look down my question list while I still have you and make sure I'm covering everything that I wanted to ask you about. Oh yeah, so one of the last like maybe two questions I have is we've covered a little bit about like the differences and similarities between making pieces that are wearable or not, and how these things have like how beadwork just has like this amazing life of its own that's shifting and alive. And so how do you contend with that when you install work or show it in the gallery space? Do you think at all about um like how to present it in unique ways? I like as a beader myself, like I find that it's like a real struggle sometimes. There's no like expansive uh contemporary like installation lexicon for beadwork like there is for other kinds of artwork. And so, I take something that I'm like working on in my lap and then tack it to a wall or put it in a podium, and it feels like very different. And so I was wondering if you think about that at all, especially having, gone to film school, which is like kind of like time-based medium, or yeah, how do you experience that?
Yeah, I've kind of had a little bit of difficulty presenting my works as well. Usually they're on like a kind of plinth,
Hmm.
and it for now it seems to work. But because my works are super 3D, we're missing the entire bottom half of the
Hmm.
work. So it becomes challenging to place it in such a way that one could see all of the different angles. I wish we had a little more of a futuristic society where we mastered anti-gravity, so I can just pop it in the column and it floats like this and it just
Man, that's
goes like,
all we all want. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I wish I could do that
One day, hopefully they'll work on it.
to somehow suspend it,
Hmm.
I feel like
Hmm.
if I was to try to suspend it, I would have to replace a few of the points on the end here with some, what you call it, wire guardians, so that
Mm.
would work that way. But then that would change maybe not everything else, but I wouldn't I it would be there, I guess. I could be open to it. I mean, I am open to it. It's just constructing the piece in such a way that it will allow for suspension is will be kind of a challenge.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you ever show pieces like in completely different, like the top is actually the bottom the next time you show it so that you can get that? Or, I mean, or do your pieces just fly off the shelf so quickly that you don't get to like display them again, maybe too?
Yeah, no, usually they get purchased.
Snapped up
If
right
not,
away.
if not at the time, then people will approach the gallerists after and
Mm-hmm.
inquire about the pieces. And it really helps me. I'm very grateful for it.
That's
Artists, we can get very in our own heads. We can get self-doubting. We can be like, oh, I've slaved and worked on this piece, but now I don't feel good about it, so I don't want to show it. You know what I mean? Or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah, myself too. It happens, but not as often as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
I
at a
see.
place where like, okay, I know the value of this work now. There's demand for it. People want to know what I'm doing, how I think about this work, what it means. So I should keep doing it. But it can be hard. We stumble and fall and that sort of thing. Uh, but yeah, it's encouraging to know that people do like what they see. And yeah, my pieces don't really have a beginning or an end. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's the other part about them as well. Many people have mentioned that they have no beginning, no end. They just kind of are,
Yeah.
which I think adds more depth to the works because there is no beginning, no end. It just is, just kind of
Mhm.
how we are. We simply are.
Yeah. It's amazing. Um, okay, so to end, I guess we have a very diverse kind of audience for these talks, but a lot of us are really intense bead nerds or craft nerds. And so if there are any, I don't know, tips or insights or thoughts or even questions you have to put out there for people that are like hyper specific to your craftsmanship or to the beadwork, I mean, like if you have any uh tips and tricks for like how you tuck in tails or like a favorite thread that you use or a certain technique that you are interested in learning but haven't yet, etc. If there's any like super bead nerdy stuff you want to chat about before we go, I figured I would give you that opportunity too.
Sure. I can tell you the thread that I like to use.
Sure.
The old
A
beetle and
fire line.
wildfire. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has that coating on the top of it, which protects the inside of the thread. It allows it to be a little more, how would you say, tame or a little more workable.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really curl up as much. And Yeah, it's tough, but sometimes even my works are just like it eats the thread. But it's a good thread to work with because it's because of its flexibility. And in terms of let's say how I work on my pieces and tuck in the threads, I use two different ways.
Mm,
Um, in the beginning, I used to use the loop lock,
okay.
which is uh, how do I describe this? Say you have some peyote that you're working on, and you have a little bit of let's say like a group of four beads that are similar in size.
Hmm.
What you can do is make a loop around each of those four beads so that it locks the thread into the work in a
Hmm.
way that is not very obtrusive. So if you have a piece like that, you would go two up, then switch direction, two down, and then come back the way you were.
Mm. Mhm.
That once or twice, and that's a really good way of locking it down. Now, if we were to get even more super specific on, let's say, the type of work I'm doing here, this is a combination of warped pentagon plus Cellini technique, for those who already know. Um, and another way I like to tuck in the tails if I have long enough thread and I have the room on my pieces here, we can see how the curvature can sometimes make it really difficult to bring a thread within so you
Yeah.
have to really know which side you're on. So let's say if I was on the corner here, the corner, and I wanted to tuck in my thread,
Hmm.
what I would do is I would go all the way down on the dark topaz beads right here. I would
Okay,
bring it
so.
down as far as I could,
Mhm.
because the further I go, the more it won't come out. So I bring it down as far as I can and then cut the thread. Then
Mhm.
I'll know that the piece is secure and I can put my new thread on.
Mhm.
Actually, what I do first is that I put the new thread a little bit before the old one, build on it first, and then tuck in the old thread.
Right.
That way it locks the new thread in, and I also have the advantage of um, making the work even more neater because I won't have the loop that I'll see
Mhm.
it, but not other people will. But
Yeah.
now I can get even more flawless with the work if I tuck it in on the side or on one of them corners, so that it's just more. And I like to put my excuse me, push myself a little more in that kind of direction too, in the sense of like, yes, I know beadwork isn't perfect, and in some cases it's allowed and encouraged to be imperfect as well. At least coming from a First Nations perspective, because, for example, let's say having a spirit bead within the work, a bead that is not like the others,
Mhm.
is okay because the mistake is a way of the artist being humble towards like, you know, God or the universe, as it were.
Mhm.
With bead weaving also, you can. I know there's a lot of perfection, or rather, tendency to have perfectionism, but I I don't like to follow that because perfectionism has an end goal, or it has an end. Excellence
Yeah.
doesn't. Excellence
That's.
doesn't. You can always do things better. There's always you can always be excellent. You know what I mean? Being
Mhm.
perfect is not as fun because there's a dead end. And
That's
yeah,
beautifully said. Yeah.
and for me, I took that weight off my shoulders because I knew that I wouldn't enjoy my process anymore if I stuck with it.
Yeah.
So over my, how would you say, experience of making these, it helped me to let go of the idea of perfectionism. Because while many of these pieces are indeed flawless, there are some that have had breakages, and I've had to
Mhm.
perform surgeries on these things to, go around the corners, pushing beads up, and then like making sure I can get the weave, and then like getting the thread path back together, and then
Yeah.
coming back up, and that's a lot. It's a lot of work, but it showed me that imperfections really don't matter because the consumers of art, patrons of art, consume art as a whole. You're not going to
Mhm.
walk up to the Mona Lisa and then you're going to be like, okay, I noticed this and that and this and the other thing, or whatever you can consider a mistake or a flaw, and then that ruins your experience with the Mona Lisa. No, most people walk up there, see the Mona Lisa, and enjoy it. They're right in front of it. You're seeing it. This is the Mona Lisa. This is the art, flaws and all. The artist knows where all those things are, but as a patron, we don't. And it's the same with my work too. not that I'm comparing myself to that artist, but like I'm seeing that the experience of art um doesn't really matter if you have imperfections or not, because people will still enjoy it, they'll still consume it.
Mhm.
I know what the mistakes are. I know what the story of the piece, the construction of this piece. I know that as the artist, but the audience doesn't have to. But because of that, it brings more depth to the piece that way, as an artist at least.
I think so too, and I think that idea of even using the term like like performing surgeries on your pieces and like what that kind of does to the work, it's just like part of what makes it, like the kind of like life system of that beadwork rich and exciting. Just like, sometimes there are things that are not great that happen in our lives, but they add to our stories as well.
Mhm.
So I
Some
think it's
people
great.
like flaws, if you can believe that. There's
I mean,
artists
I
that
do.
think things are perfect.
I used to love putting like the misfit beads that you get sometimes into my work too, because it gives more texture and a little bit of interest and
Mhm.
something
If things
different.
were all the same, I think it would be a little boring
I
per
agree.
se, but like it's hard to say because our beadwork just has that human touch to it. And these little imperfections or little flaws or it's hard to say mistakes too, but you get what I mean, right? Some of these
Yeah,
things are a part of that work or a part of the story of that work too. And
absolutely.
I think it can be hard as artists to live with and accept them.
Absolutely. Well, um, I think that's a really nice place to end. I want to thank you so much for sharing your work with us and for being so generous in your thoughts and sharing so much about your process and the ideas behind these pieces. I feel like your work has really opened up for me, and I'm sure a lot of people watching will feel that way too. Um, and yeah, and feel very inspired in general. So yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to end on? I think we have like 2 more minutes left in this recording. But I want to give you a chance to sign off.
Sure, I can show you really quick what I'm working on right now.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me stop sharing my screen and then get you big. Yeah.
So what I have here is a like a it's another step in my journey, let's say. I have right here foiled birch bark that I have backed with, oops, excuse me, that I have backed with fish skin leather that I tanned myself, and I'm beating an edge around this to create earrings with. So
Beautiful.
I'm starting to dip more into wearables, more wearables as it were, and I have 20 pairs of earrings to make for a retailer in Toronto called Anin.
Okay.
And so I'm having some works for sale, and I'm starting to combine even more of my culture with my contemporary works. So I just wanted to show you what's on my mat right now,
Thank you. Yeah.
and just where I want to go with this work too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. For the audience, I will let you know that Craig mentioned that he's got a new website coming up soon, so you can find out more of his work when that's up. And yeah, check out the retailers and the galleries that show his work. And yeah, Craig, thank you so much.
Mhm. I have one show coming up
Oh, great.
at Jeannot Lapin Gallery in Verdun in Montreal.
Oh, great. I have a friend who did
Awesome.
residency there. That's awesome. Great. I'll look out for that.
So August 7th. Don't be late.
Great. All right, so head on down to Montreal, everyone, and see
Yeah,
this show. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I'll leave you to your day. But I hope we keep in touch and we talk again soon. It's been really great meeting you and chatting about your work.
likewise. I really respect what you do too.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, this has been lovely. Have an excellent day, and I'll let you know when this is up to view.
Thanks so much.
All
See you soon.
right, bye.